Today I'm going to give you 5 tips on how to win your games on Corrode. The map's been out for a little bit of time now, and there's definitely some things we have learned. The first one here is to do with playing controllers, and particularly if you're playing, for instance, Omen or Astra. This is something that I pointed out that happened in the EDG game. When you're smoking over towards this B site, one thing that you need to understand is that your 2 smokes are probably going to go one in towards heaven just here, and one into kind of towards mid. The thing is, you need to smoke off heaven first when you are doing this, right? So you're going to smoke this first because that's what you're going to see first, right? You're not going to see these guys before you see those guys. So this is why this smoke must come first, and then your second smoke is going to come here. Okay, that's basically the way it's going to work, because otherwise you're going to run into the problem where, you know, you're trying to scale in here, but you might not see anyone there, but anyone up there is going to be a big problem for you. So that's the first lesson for this. But the second lesson is when we're coming over towards the A site, you really need to be on it. If you're playing really any controller, Clove, Brim, Omen, whatever, right? Really whatever it is, you need to be on it with this A site. You need to understand really your team's plan, because if you just do kind of, you know, Barry basic, like, oh, this looks like where you might smoke, right, for this A site, like this is where, you know, kind of the defender choke points to come back in are. If you just smoke that like before you know, have really touched the site just yet, I mean, particularly this second one here, I mean, it's just gonna fade before you've even got there, right? Like, you've got so much, this A site is so big that you have so much room to kind of cover that really you don't need to do that, right? And also with this smoke as well, you need to understand how ambitious you want to be, because here's the thing: if you're coming in towards this A site and you do smoke off this, right, and you think, well, yep, we're just going to take all this space on the A site, well, at some point you're going to be scaling and potentially looking up this way. And if your duelist or whoever is looking up this way, and, you know, it's a rank game, this guy probably might swing out and he's just looking at people looking the other way, you know, you might be in a lot of trouble if that happens. So you need to understand kind of what your team's game plan is, right? Are we smoking here or are we smoking here, right? Are we just going towards elbow? And if so, maybe it's easier to just smoke that off. If not, and we do want to kind of take this space and that's our plan, then sure, we can go for this smoke and that will work out perfectly well. You might even be doing an A split and say, we're not even going to bother with this, right? We're actually going to smoke that side off instead, right? And we're just going to deal with this side, right? This is the thing you need to understand about this A site, is there is a lot of different ways you can approach it, and that's going to matter. But then when it comes to the second smoke, as I said, you don't need to be doing, you know, a smoke down here early on. You can just use one smoke, right? Let's say that we do just go for kind of a passive smoke here, and then we're going to scale in towards elbow, right? We can wait till we've kind of cleared all this out, then we can smoke this off, right? We don't need to do that straight away. And then even by then we might even have a second smoke and do something like this, right? That's something that you might end up doing, is smoking this and this, right? So this A site, as you can see, for a controller, there is a lot of different options that you could potentially do, and it's very important that you understand what your team wants to do as a controller on this A site. Okay, for the second tip here, we're going to talk about whether this map is attack or defense sided, because a lot of people have been asking me this question, and generally I think the sentiment is that this is a defensive sided map, right? There is a lot of like close little things that you have to clear if you're the attackers. There's a lot of like ratty little positions that people could be in with a bunch of different guns and all of that, right, that can create some problems for you, right? So there's a lot potentially to do as the attackers to clear out all of these areas effectively. However, one thing that I think people have misunderstood potentially with this map, and we have seen some very defense-sided games like Crew versus 2G, and some very attack-sided games like Wolves FPX. And the reason for that is because if you are the defenders and someone dies, you're in a lot of trouble. And to showcase that, let's take a look at a round from the Wolves FPX game. So this one here, round 15, it's a bonus round for Wolves, and what we're going to see in a second is that some of these players are going to die for FPX. We're kind of going to go back and forth a little bit here. We're going to get, you know, a bit of a skirmish coming out, and somehow FPX don't die. Don't ask me how. As a Wolves fan, I was quite annoyed. But eventually, what happens is that we kind of go back into this skirmish. This smoke is going to drop, and Wolves are going to manage to kill these FPX players. And I'm just going to show you right now what happens essentially when these players die, right? So we get a kill on the B site, and we get one kill just there. And here's the thing about this map, is that it's very, very big rotation-wise. So whilst, yes, 5v5, this map is maybe defender-sided, as soon as you lose a player on the defensive side, you have a real problem. You have a real problem. For instance, let's just take a look at Autumn here, right? A guy has died over here on him. Someone has died on the B site. No help is coming anytime soon. And even when, you know, all of this skirmish is going on here, you might be like, well, these guys haven't moved. Yeah, because they can't really, right? Because it's very easy for the attackers to just come back down this way. And, you know, if they've got one guy in A main, you know, which is hard to take as the defenders, right? It's hard to push up in that space. So these guys don't move. Whilst all of that skirmishing was going on over here, these guys just don't move. And that's the thing. As soon as one of these guys dies, then these guys might move, but they're ages away. That, like, once you've lost mid as the defenders, like, well, you can't I mean, you could come this way, but it would be a massive risk, right? And particularly in high level play, that's not going to happen. So this is basically the point, that if you are playing on defense side, you need to understand like how important your life is, because 5v5, you know, defenders, you can do pretty well on this map. There's a lot of different things you can potentially do, but as soon as you lose even just one player, you do end up in a pretty difficult spot, because those rotates are going to be miles away. And if you know how to lurk on this map as an attacker, then as soon as you get that first kill, it's difficult. And as you see, Autumn there really has no good option. And speaking to that point, you know, a lot of people have pointed out about the paper walls on this map, and that, you know, the Odin or potentially even Ares as well, or just any high pen gun, right, is going to cause some menace on this map, right? And it's going to cause some problems. We haven't seen that too much in the pro levels. We have seen some Odins, but perhaps not, you know, as many as people might expect. But I'm sure we will see some people, you know, really start to abuse this potentially towards particularly this A site. But another thing is, we have seen quite a few thrifties on this map, right? And that's where guns like the Bucky or things like that can thrive, because again, particularly defensive eco rounds, you really do have a chance. Again, because there is so many close corners to play, like if you're on the attack side, one thing you need to know is that like these rounds against ecos are not free at all, especially if they could be bringing out Buckies or the like, because again, there is just so many potential areas that could cause you some problems, right? So I mean, just even something like this, right, that you might not even really consider that someone might do that, but it is a consideration on this map, and you do need to be extremely careful on this map. Now, one thing that I think we learned from the crew game against 2G is the way that they played their defense side, and they had a very dominant defense side, was they just decided to completely own mid, right? And in this round, we're going to see just what that can do for you, right? So let's take a look at this round just here, round number 8, and as we're going to see, crew are going to get pushed up aggressive in mid, right? They've got their Viper wall coming across here. I should also note that Wolves got caught out by this a bit of time, where they were also doing a similar Viper wall, but they were getting picked off. If you come on top of this box, you can actually see people, like you can just about see their head like all the way back here. So just be aware of that, basically, that sometimes that might happen to you, and that is a potential threat, because it caught Wolves out a couple times. But just take a look at what giving mid does to them, right? Because as I said, the rotates on this map can be super long. Well, not if we own mid, right? If we get someone like pushed up here or pushed up on this other side, then we don't have that problem, right? So this time they come across, they Vipers pit B, but we still got a Roman all the way pushed up here. If you can get to this spot as the defenders, like if this is something that you can do, as crew did, because they did this consistently in this map, you will just win the map, basically. Because at that point, you have really fast rotations, right? Much faster than you otherwise would. And the attackers are very limited then in terms of their options. They're either running into a, you know, this B choke point, which, as we've mentioned before, can be pretty nasty, and again, you can get there pretty quick, particularly if you're playing, you know, a Yoru Neon or whatever, who can get there a bit quicker. Or they're basically gonna have to just come down elbow, and then your retake here on A can, you know, be pretty fast flooded in, and potentially have a flank coming in as well. And then finally, one thing I want to point out, again, let's take a look at the Wolves FPX game here, and in this round, what happens, again, is once you get into these situations where someone dies, right? So in this round, we're gonna get a quick trade here on Juicy, and then we're gonna get another kill here from Spring in just a second. What I want to point out is that top mid area that, you know, you might look at and be like, oh, that's not an area I really want to go to. What I've noticed is in these pro games that we've seen thus far, particularly anytime, you know, you do end up in like a 4v4 or anything like that, this area here, as you can see right now, does often end up looking like this, where there isn't anyone close to it. Because again, these guys, particularly if you come into mid here as the attackers and you own this space, they can't really move very easily, right? Because you very easily could pivot either direction. So generally, these guys don't move. Once the attackers like actually take mid, there isn't a lot of movement, and very rarely at that point in the round has anyone been here. Now, maybe as the map gets, you know, better and better, maybe people will stay there. I don't know. At least for right now, you will often see something like this, where if this Omen, you know, TP'd across up here and got up into here, no one would be there for him, right? And I've seen that, like, if you did go up into this space, which no one really has done that much yet, but if you did, you know, eventually these guys will rotate if you've taken mid. And because you've taken mid, often at higher levels, you know, they will rotate through spawn. And this is easy way of killing. But even if they do go for the aggressive rotate through mid, are they really going to be looking for someone in here, right? Are they going to be expecting you? Probably not. So I think at least for now, before people really know what to do on this map, this area is probably more open than you think. You probably think that this is an area that you can't really go to as the attackers, but because this takes so long, it's much quicker for you to go from here to there than it is for anyone on A or B, you know, to rotate across to that position. You're gonna beat them there, and then you potentially can get a kill. Now, from that position, like if you do get this kill, wrapping all the way around, like if your team is planted on B or whatever, is also going to take an extraordinarily long amount of time. So I'm not too sure about like actually pushing all the way through. There might be some instances where that's possible, but in general, if you can just stay within this box and like pick people off who are rotating, that seems like it's actually a viable option option a lot of the time, because it is being left open, even in these pro games. So in your ranked games, it almost certainly is. And so those are 5 quick tips for the new map Corrode. Subscribe to this channel for more.